Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the Pennsylvania Automated Vehicle Summit. Today is the Workforce and People Day of the conference. My name is Roger Cohen, and I will be moderating today's opening discussion. Forgive us for those technical difficulties getting started, but hopefully we are now on a good track forward. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to our featured opening speakers during this opening session of this today, and also make a special point of thanking our platinum sponsors for the whole conference: HNTB, Locomation, Michael Baker International. I'd also like to thank today's gold sponsors, AECOM, and finally thank our silver sponsors, Jacobs and Drive Engineering, for sponsoring today's Impact of CAVs in the Public Sector and Incident Management breakout sessions. We thank our many sponsors whose contributions have helped to make this event possible. A few housekeeping items before we begin. So you're all aware, this session will be recorded and available to the attendees later this year. You'll also see that your microphone has been automatically muted to reduce background noise. Please feel free to use the chat function on the right side of your screen for general conversation and comments. For questions to our speakers, use the Q&A function, and you can vote for the questions you want to have them answered during the course of our discussion today. I will be pulling questions exclusively from the Q&A function. Anything on the chat we will probably miss. So today I'd like to introduce our distinguished speakers: Greg Regan, President of the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. Greg, welcome, and please take a short moment to tell our audience about the TTD.
Thank you, Roger, and it's a real pleasure to be here. This is an important subject for all of us. Again, my name is Greg Regan. I'm the president of the 33 Union Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. We represent unions in all modes of transportation across, whether it be building, operating, maintenance, or construction. So we have a vested interest in all of this throughout the supply chain, and our members are the ones who are going to be interacting with a lot of this technology as it becomes deployed into the system, and we're eager to be a big part in the policy discussion. Thank you.
Greg, our second guest, to those of you from Pennsylvania, needs little or no introduction. Pedro Rivera is the president of the Thaddeus Stevens College of Technology. He took that role following a very successful tenure as Governor Wolf's Secretary of Education. Prior to that, he was superintendent of schools in my hometown of Lancaster. Go Red Tornadoes, and was, before that, executive director of the Philadelphia School. So he has spent his entire career building ladders of opportunity. Pedro, just tell us a short bit about Thaddeus Stevens College, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Roger. Really excited to be here. In this opportunity at Thaddeus Stevens College of Technology, I get to serve in a 2-year institution whose sole focus is to serve low-income, underrepresented communities towards gainful employment. Over the course of the past year, we've seen 97% of our students find gainful employment in all of these areas. So the future of technology and automotive, and many of the discussions we're going to have today, is important for us because it's not only about what's happening now, but how to prepare the next generation workforce. So really excited to be here.
Thanks, Pedro. So just to get the conversation started, I want to frame our discussion today. What we want to talk about are what policies, including laws and regulations, should be explored to ensure that the benefits of technological innovation in transportation flow equitably to all our citizens and all our communities, and particularly to workers. And how do we minimize the dislocations often associated with technological innovation and advancement? What are the programs and training that are necessary to position the workforce to take full advantage of opportunities created by the deployment of these technologies in the transportation sector? So with that, I'll start with Greg, please. when you look out from your office in Washington D.C., representing your members and your unions, how do you view this revolution that's transpiring in technology of transportation and particularly automation?
Sure. I think the policy question surrounding the increase in automation and advanced technology is really complex. I think we have, fortunately, we have an opportunity here with a fairly long on-ramp before these are fully integrated into our systems to get the policy right here. And I think, well, perhaps selfishly, but I think in part because we represent the people who are going to be interacting with the most, unions are going to play a central part in that in terms of making sure that we're developing a policy, that we're getting the right training programs in place so that people and workers are able to advance their own skill set along with the technology, and that we maintain a safe operation of all of our systems as this is deployed into our overall, broader transportation network. So these are tricky questions to answer. These are not going to be simple solutions. And I think all of us recognize that. And we also recognize that we're not going to, stop innovation. In fact, transportation workers, whether they be pilots or mechanics, have been advancing their careers along with technology for as long as they've been doing their jobs, whether it be from the very beginnings of the steam engine through current now when we're dealing with iPads instead of toolboxes on the maintenance side. So we have an opportunity here to get the policy right and to make sure that we are, that people are developing and our economic prosperity is going to extend towards people throughout the supply chain.
And Roger, I can definitely piggyback off of what Greg was sharing. For us in the education space, it's been absolutely impactful as well. We realize through policy, lawmakers and both locally and nationally, they set the conditions by which our employees are working under, but the next generation innovators are starting to create these opportunities. And I just think about this new space that I'm in now, coming from the state back to a practitioner in education. And one of the things that I've realized, there is a huge demand, and there's a short-term demand and a long-term demand for a skilled workforce. I mean, I just think of our last year where we're here in this higher ed space. We've started to see a bit of a decline in the number of students wanting to go and take advantage of higher ed opportunities, but not in institutions like ours. As a matter of fact, we've seen a 2% increase in the number of students that are looking to come to our college. And at the same time, when we think of employers come to visit our campus all the time and offer our students jobs right on the spot because of their skill set. Last year, we saw about 12 and a half jobs offered for every single one of our students applying for jobs. And so when you think about the need for good, strong policy and investment in the future, it's realizing that the policy has to impact the fact that, manufacturing, transportation, technology, we need a short fix because we need a workforce now, but we need a long-term fix as well because we realize that the next generation standards and the next generation technology is going to be grounded in some of the technology we haven't even seen yet. And so, I think what we have to do in this space is provide an opportunity and investment so that we can meet the current demand, but know that we have to build upon these experiences for the next generation workforce. And, in order to do that successfully, because we are seeing a skills gap, and we know that to be true. So in order to do that successfully, we have to make investments that allow us to pinpoint what we need now, but build out, with some deliberate into the future for the next generation workforce. And, and I don't even think we need to start thinking generations, but we do need to start thinking what technology is going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, and continue to grow in that direction.
Thank you, Pedro. Greg, when you consider how technology is impacting work life for workers, what are the things that can be done to make sure that that technology is improving the quality of life and the quality of the experience that workers face as they take on the job?
Well, first of all, I'd have to point out that safety regulation is probably one of the most important aspects here. Making sure that as we're deploying new technology and automated technology, that we're not sacrificing anything when it comes to safety. And I know that there can be, down the road, there are potential benefits to technology when it comes to safety. We've seen that, for instance, in the airline sector, where the cockpit is a technological workplace right now. And it provides safety and additional benefits to a well-trained pilot. But we can't just take that as a matter of faith that that's what's going to happen. So I think a highly regulated safety environment is really critical to making sure that as this is developed and integrated into our current system, that we're going to make sure that it adds benefit to what we already have here. And then more importantly, I think, making sure that there are regulations and policies in place to ensure that the existing workforce has the resources they need in order to advance along with technology, whether it be, we see it with the electric vehicles, for instance. There's a huge percentage of people who currently do maintenance on buses do not know how to use a voltmeter, which is one of the most basic diagnostic tools when it comes to electric buses. So that type of training needs to be in place, whether it be with electrification or automation, so that the workforce who is doing this stuff now has the skills necessary to be able to advance into the future and keep the system safe and make sure it's benefiting all of its users as well.
That's a great segue into the whole idea of electrification, which accompanies automation as a major trend. So, Pedro, what are you doing to train for electrification? Parenthetically, I saw an article in The Economist just last week about how there's such a shortage of technicians and mechanics who understand the differences in the technology of electric vehicles, and because of the much higher voltages of the battery, it's a lot trickier and more dangerous. So, what are the programs to get people ready?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we know that this is an ever-evolving field, right? So first and foremost, we just invested in building a really aggressive state-of-the-art transportation center. So this is students on campus in our transportation center. This thing is 3 football fields wide, and it really offers really vast modalities of instruction in this space. So first and foremost, it's about hiring talent. I mean, having the instructors in place that can build the foundational skills of students on site, real time, through this hands-on approach. Secondly, one of the areas that we realized we had to invest in is starting, to purchase equipment and supplies that students might not even be using yet. So, for example, auto lifts and our auto in both our auto and our heavy machinery area bays. We now have lifts that are equipped to service electrical vehicles, although we're not yet doing that, but we have the infrastructure set up for students to learn and to engage in that modality of transportation. We also realize just the technology that students are using themselves. I mean, a voltometer, the meters that we're using in those spaces no longer look like, the simple, the tools that you just kind of plugged in and you checked from before. We see students walking around with tablets and laptops, not just for providing their traditional type of instruction, but walking around and diagnosing vehicles, in the space right there in lab. So we're not only teaching them how to work on the vehicles that they've historically been working on, but how to utilize the technology in that space to use technology for learning and for servicing and for building and for repairing and for and engaging in that space. But also, I think what's different about the type of education you want to receive for us is that we not only get into the highly technical field, but we still value the traditional aspects of education. I mean, our students, in order to be into some of the heavy electrical technologies, you're taking high-level algebra, you're taking calculus, you're taking courses that are not only providing the technical support, but how to problem solve. Around many of the computations that students are learning and how to use some of the new tools that are out there. So for us, it's as was mentioned earlier, it's not just about understanding what the current needs in industry are today, but it's putting the tools in place so that students can learn the foundation. So when they go out into the workforce, can use new technology to understand how, issues such as, the use of electrical equipment, supplies, and what they're working on is going to impact the field moving forward. And we have to know that this is an ever-evolving technology that we have to build a foundation for today.
Let me follow up with you, Pedro, on that. Yesterday, Dr. Stephanie Ivey from University of Memphis was on one of the panels and was talking about the importance of getting at the primary and secondary education levels people acclimated to engaging with technology, as well as life skills, so that when they're getting into higher education, they're and into the job market, they are ready. So how do you bring in all of those factors? And it's not an easy task, I'm sure.
No, that's a great question. First and foremost, we have to know to own our space. I mean, we are an education institution, and so we need to focus on doing what we do well and continuing to evolve and grow in that space. Now, knowing that allows us to really, understand that partnerships are going to be extremely important. We have very robust partnerships with community-based organizations, with other educational institutions, STEM coalitions and STEM alliances, but we also make ourselves available and partner with elementary, middle, and high schools. So I'll start at the lower grades, and then I'll kind of give you a quick overview of what we do moving up. So we currently go into elementary and middle schools to provide on-site support and modules for instruction. Our instructors go out there. But, we saw the need. We're actually building a community center right off of campus through support of the Commonwealth. And on the second floor of that community center, we're building a makerspace, classroom space, STEM space, and hacker space. So instead of going out into the field, we're going to be bringing elementary and middle school kids onto campus so they can start to see and work with and utilize many of the tools that we're seeing in industry. Of course, they'll be a little lower level, right? So they might be 3D printers, or they may be fab labs, or they may be, lower level manufacturing type of equipment. But students are going to be exposed earlier on to that technology, one, to build interest, but also to really understand what the next generation technology looks like. And so we can expose them early on. When we get into middle and then high schools, we have a much more intensive system of support. So we have dual enrollment classes. So students can finish their senior year and their first full year of college on campus. And in many cases, if you qualify, it's free. So imagine earning your high school diploma and your first year towards a degree at the same time in many of these areas. We also offer college in the high school where teachers can teach some of these opportunities on their own high school campuses. And we have credit articulation agreements with career and technical education centers. So if you're going to a CTC right now and you're learning some of the basic skills that can make you successful in our programs, through this credit articulation, we're offering you credits towards your major when you come onto campus and providing a pathway to success as you continue to move forward. But Roger, you're absolutely right. We're no longer at a time where you can do elementary school stop, middle school stop, high school stop, post-secondary college stop. Now there has to be, a really smooth transition from year to year, because the foundation needed to be successful in this new technological, era, has to start early on. And that's why the partnerships we engage in are extremely important. And we have, high school students through our campus regularly, and work really hard, to recruit and engage them into our majors.
Fantastic. So I want to remind everyone that the Q&A function is open on, I believe it's the right-hand side of your screen, and I expect some provocative questions. Several of you who are in the audience I know. So I'll be getting back to you if you remain silent too long. I want to pivot now to Greg, if I could. There was I saw a comment by University of California professor Carol Zukin, who said that we want technology to affect tasks, not jobs. But the fact of the matter is that jobs may be created, but jobs may disappear. In fact, that's if past practice is the guide, that's what will happen. So I'm curious as to what history tells us about that and what we can do policy-wise to mitigate and minimize those negative impacts. Should there be a dislocation fund, for instance, that industry pays for, or that the government pays for jobs that do disappear for perhaps older workers who are not in a position necessarily to be retrained? How do you address those things?
Yes. Look, I think a relocation fund, dislocation fund is absolutely something that should be considered as policymakers address this problem. Several years ago, Securing America's Future Energy came out with a report that claimed that the transition to automated vehicles will be slow and that the labor market is very good at absorbing displaced workers over long periods of time. What that report completely failed to mention are the lifelong wage suppression effects that workers suffer when they are displaced by automation. And we've seen that across the board throughout many sectors as we see advanced technology and what happens to workforces over time. So I think it's quality of job that also needs to be addressed by policy. And it also, if you look at some of the instances where we've seen massive disruption to our economy, I think about the 90s with trade and automation, both of which contributed to the decline in manufacturing jobs in this country. We did not adequately, as policymakers, plan for that. We tried to address something after the fact through the Trade Adjustment Assistance Program, which was more or less a community college voucher for people who are mid or late career that suddenly have to find new skills. And that is a very flawed program and one that did not address the problem at its core. So I think that is the challenge for policymakers right now is the fact that we do have this, we can see what the impacts are going to be. Just on the number of people that are engaged in driving as a profession, we know the people that are going to be impacted by this. So what can we do in the short term right now and the long term to ensure that people are being trained up to have jobs in the new field, that they're able to gain the skills necessary to operate with the new technology, but then also to make sure that we are effectively dealing with people who are going to be displaced. And I think that that type of dislocation fund or other policies need to be considered so that we're not just having severe economic consequences for big portions of our economy and people who frankly cannot deal with the adjustment in that quick of a turnaround.
Now, some people, I think it was mentioned yesterday, there was some thought that older workers who may not be the strongest candidates for still have enormous value for mentoring. So I'd like to ask each of you about that whole mentoring role and within your institutions, how you make that work. I'll start with Pedro.
So absolutely, we have a number of different ways. So we have the formal modality of mentoring, and then we have informal. So first and foremost, formal, the instructors in the labs, provide so much one-on-one engagement with our students. I mean, when you're dealing with hands-on, majors and hands-on opportunities, the time that it takes for a person-to-person contact, reviewing, going over, doing it again and again, is extremely important. And just through that, you tend to build relationships. And we hear most often from most of our students that's the number one benefit of going through an extremely hands-on program. But then what we also realize, I mean, we look at the time that we're living in, right? It's not only about instruction, but providing opportunities for members of our school community to engage with others around, mental health and some of the social emotional factors and some of the other factors is, continues to be extremely important. As times continue to kind of evolve in this, in the skills space, we can't forget that this has a mental, and social emotional impact on what a lot of us are going through as well. And so when you think about, providing that mentoring, it's also within, within that that social emotional space as well. But I also have to go. Again, this is probably, when you think of this area, the need to have it to engage an occupational advisory council or an industry advisory council is extremely important. Bringing in actual, folks who are practitioners, folks who are in the business sector, folks that are in the technical sector, so that they can share as real time as possible what they're seeing out there, and kind of serving as a mentor to our institution is extremely important. Because through this evolution, you can only learn so much by reading the reports and following on the top occupations. You have to provide an opportunity to bring real-time practitioners in to kind of serve as your as your mentor in that space of business and of industry, so that you ensure that you're moving in the right direction. And lastly, let's not discount young people. One of the things we realize through our students, sometimes they serve as mentors as well, because when you think of careers now, this generation of student, they say, can have upwards of 10 careers over the course of their lifetime. And if we're not preparing ourselves, if we continue to hold on to the old, to our old feelings that we're going to do the same job for the rest of our lives and just get really good at it, we're going to fail a whole generation of students. And so one of the things that we have to do is we have to engage them so we can better understand where they see themselves, what they need, how do they define success, and and drive the changes to adapt and to meet their needs as well. Because without them, we don't have the next generation workforce, right? And so we need to look at engaging mentors and engaging individuals in all different types of spaces.
Greg, you want to amplify how mid-career or late-career workers who may be affected by technology and change, and automation in particular, how they can be put to productive use?
Yes, and I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody in the professional world who hasn't been affected in some way by a mentor or even a mentee in terms of their advancement, whether it be just simple institutional memory, or whether it be just leadership in terms of how to behave in the workplace. All these things are valuable and help us become better actors in the economy. So I think that's true in any field, and it's certainly going to be true here as we move forward into a new, the next frontier of tech. But one thing I also want to raise here is when it comes to training, and when it comes to and training is again one of the aspects of mentoring here. Unions play a really big role in that. Just as an example, the building trades right now, the U.S. building trades unions, they are the second highest trainer of new workers in our economy after DOD. They're the ones that the unions are the ones who are providing that place to be able to advance, these systems and the ways that we are bringing people into the economy and making sure they're effective at their jobs and have the skills needed to perform at a high level. And that needs to be true here as we start to bring new tech in and we start to develop training programs so that we're able to integrate it safely. Unions are ready, and we're able to be part of that solution and able to provide some of the leadership and mentorship that is going to be necessary.
Excellent. So we're starting to get some questions coming in, and I think it's probably a good time to turn to them. The first one is to you, Greg. It's you're mentioning that quality of jobs should be addressed by policy. Can you provide examples of what policy like that would look like? What would it entail? And to prompt you, maybe we could go back into history and talk about the ILA and containerization.
Sure. Well, look, I think a key part of this here, when I talk about quality of jobs, for us, it's not just a wage, it's benefits. It's all of the things that we think of if you're looking at a package when thinking about accepting a job, all of the things that go into it, leave policy, healthcare, life insurance, all of those things that make a job a quality job. If you look at a lot of times the current criticism about green energy that we start seeing is you have people who are in the energy sector right now who have good union contracts, who are making $45, $50 an hour with good benefits, and then you're expecting them to go to a non-union workplace where they're making $15 an hour with no benefits. That's not a fair trade-off, and you wonder why people in these sectors they're not embracing the idea of moving to this different job that is not going to provide them anywhere close to what they're making in their current position. So, part of that is making sure that unionization, collective bargaining is part of it, that we're ensuring that wages and benefits are an important part of the compensation here. And then if you're looking at the transition to tech, say you're a transit agency here, like at WMATA, for instance, making sure that the current CBA workforce, that you're not using the transition new technology to break that CBA and then start over new at lowest common denominator compensation. The people who are currently there should have the opportunity to train up and do these jobs. They should do it while they're continued to be helped by healthcare and covered by all of their current benefits. So those things are important in making sure that we have a just transition for people. And I hate that term, just transition, but that we're ensuring that you're not using this as an opportunity to just slash labor costs and benefits without sort of the longer term and larger picture concerns about what it means for the workforce and the people who are actually performing the work. And to your point about ILA containerization, I mean, that was another one where we saw with containerization that was going to have a very direct impact on the number of people, the amount of work at our harbors, our ports and harbors. And, how are we going to transition a larger workforce to ultimately a smaller workforce while maintaining worker dignity? And they did it in a way that, frankly, had a long transition, made sure people were kept whole, and that eventually we went to a system that you see now with containerization as the primary form of shipping throughout the country and throughout the world. So, there is an example that was done through the collective bargaining process, that was done with the harbor operators and the shipping companies and the union at the table to make sure that it was done right and that we weren't just going to be cutting people off and letting them float in the breeze without any support. Yeah,
I personally I'm in total agreement with that as a model for going forward. That containerization has changed the world and it's created the global economy for better and for worse. And the fact is that now our ports and harbors are one of the epicenters of technological innovation, including automation, and the fact that it had that cooperative transition, I think, is essential to the fact that it's in position to do what it's doing now. So, and as we look at the pandemic and the supply chain issues that arise in response to the pandemic, it's certainly essential that those efficiencies and those skilled workers who are kind of implementing those efficiencies are there and ready to go. So, Pedro, you're nodding in agreement, but you want to add any perspective?
Can I also just add one more thing? The idea here of wage degradation on par with job losses, I think, is an important part that we have to consider. And that's the key to job quality and the quality of jobs we expect. It's one thing to say that jobs are going to be reabsorbed. It's another thing to not know that or to have them be jobs that are just simply minimum wage jobs without the benefits that people experienced before. So degradation is something we really have to push against.
Good. Pedro, any thoughts?
Yeah, I can absolutely piggyback off of much of what Greg shared. I mean, even as an institution, we will not offer a major that doesn't lead to a family-sustaining wage. And often we find ourselves considering, should we stop offering a major? There are different areas that industry would like for us to develop, and we have to tell them it doesn't lead to one, there isn't a demand, and secondly, it doesn't lead to a family-sustaining wage, and so we won't offer it. And at the same time, we realize that we've now assumed this new workforce development and programming space where, historically we focused on certificate programs and 2-year programs, but now, because of the needs in our families and the needs in industry, we've been partnering with community-based organizations, and we offer about 5 workforce programs. So these are 6-week to 6-month programs that help families receive additional or help individuals receive additional training so that they can either skill up or build up workforce opportunities, and they're wildly popular. I mean, when you think about the need for for American families today to either learn a new skill to ramp up their skill set, or for an employer to train someone in that new skill. There aren't many opportunities out there, for workers. And for us, in support of the Commonwealth, what we've done is we've created these new programs, and we have many individuals that are coming into them just to skill up and to really improve their earning potential. And so the need is great. And when you think about not just in terms of workforce, and not just in terms of understanding new technology and the evolution of of the workforce, but also the means by which to do that. And as I shared earlier, Roger, we kind of own the education space, but we wouldn't be able to provide these opportunities if not for a business, or if not for a community-based organization and our business partners who sometimes offer grants so that someone can receive funding while going back to to retrain and to reskill. Sometimes even offering systems of support to throughout the whole community. And so when you think about this has to be a whole community effort. And I think that's one of the areas where I know we here in PA are definitely thinking about this differently, but it's engaging the workforce, it's engaging community-based organizations, it's engaging workers, to create this new environment where we can train, skill up, build up, but more importantly than anything else, focus on what a family sustaining wage is, because the goal towards a lot of this work is to get folks out of poverty. And in doing that, we realize that we're not only building the next generation workforce, but we're improving our communities all across the country.
Thank you both. We have a question here that it seems that there is a good deal of automated vehicle research and development occurring here in the country, but are there incentives to ensure that the vehicles are actually manufactured here and build their products and components here in the U.S.? So let either of you or both of you take that, whichever wants to go first.
Sure. The short answer is, if there are incentives, there aren't really at this point to make sure that they're manufactured here. And unfortunately, a lot of the R&D is being done with the support of the federal government through a number of different avenues. So I do think there need to be more. I see the follow-up there in terms of, further down the line, if we're looking at automated buses or automated trains, yes, federal Buy America laws will come into play if you're purchasing these from a, for the use at a public transit agency with federal money. Those would come into play. There are certain requirements to make sure that they would have to be manufactured in the United States. What we're aiming for here on the early side, especially as we're trying to leverage R&D money, is that we have an opportunity right now to establish a real manufacturing base here, the likes of which we have not had in quite a long time. If you see what Buy America's done, for instance, on the rolling stock side, you have a lot of companies that have manufacturing facilities in the U.S., but the names of them are Alstom, Bombardier, Kawasaki, Kikishario. All of those are foreign companies with a U.S. subsidiary to essentially capture the U.S. market of public procurement in those areas. We have a chance now to do it from the ground up with this new technology, and do it in a way that is supporting, frankly, a deep manufacturing base in the United States. And I think part of the problem here, and this is something that I think Pedro can speak to well, is the idea of manufacturing jobs. I think there's a certain amount of assumptions about what a manufacturing job is. I think a lot of it's stuck on the Model T assembly lines. That's no longer the case when it comes to manufacturing jobs. These are high-tech jobs. These are skilled jobs, and ones that frankly, we can become the leader in these as we have a new market opportunity like we do with AVs and EVs and other things. So strengthening Buy America, tying more incentives to the tax breaks and the research dollars are going in, all of those should be used by policymakers to make sure that we not only gain a competitive edge, but we're going to continue to build out a job base here in the U.S.
Absolutely agreed. And when we think about R&D in this area, we have to realize that it's not just research and development in the next generation, automated vehicle. I think one of the areas that we realize the the market doesn't fully understand is something that Greg just mentioned. The need for advanced manufacturing. It's not the cardboard box manufacturing anymore. When you think about our labs that teach electrical mechanical engineering, for example, or electrical technology, or computer integrated machining. I mean, all of these are foundations of manufacturing that allow our students to learn how to create really precise pieces of equipment, or the parts that ultimately will be built into pieces of equipment. And when you think about much of the vehicles, first and foremost, we're going to have to create a workforce that's able to build the components that go into these vehicles, as well as build the vehicles, and then as well as develop the vehicles. And so when you think about it, I'm just thinking about 7 of my majors. The preciseness by which a computer science engineering technology, a software engineering technology student has to learn in order to program these, and then those who are creating the components or even programming the robotics behind this, it's extremely exact. And so research and development is one thing, but having the skilled workforce that can actually create, innovate, and program these is very much in need. And as I shared, if my students are getting 12 job offers, even when we create these, the workforce is going to be, extremely strained, and that doesn't even go into account what happens when they start to break down, and we need individuals to repair them or to grow them, and we really have to get out of this environment where everything that's being built now is disposable, because we're seeing the effects of that on our environment in general. But if we don't invest on the individuals that are going to do all the periphery work, we're just going to have really expensive paperweights out there, because we focus more on just developing the product and not developing it, or advanced developing it and not repairing it. And so, the need to invest in that infrastructure right now, especially here in the U.S. I mean, most of what I've been hearing, as well as Greg shared, is coming out of Canada or coming, from overseas, and it's an area that we have the skill set for. We just have to make the investments towards. And I will also share one more thing, because we talk about the advancement of this technology. There's a lot of decision making that also goes, into AI and many of these. I mean, I had the opportunity to visit a students debating around the course around how should artificial intelligence make decisions. So, is there a component how we teach them to make the right societal decisions as they're making, as they're developing their own spaces in this place, and students also have to learn how to be good stewards of this technology as they're looking to build it.
Excellent, thank you. So I want to make mention of a couple of points that were made at the summit in yesterday's session. One was by Secretary Gramian in her opening remarks, the PennDOT secretary, regarding the growing and collaboration at different levels of community and jurisdictions and how decisions are made. And then we heard from a DOT official yesterday who was talking about that the transportation system of tomorrow is not a system, but a system of systems, and that entails a kind of collaboration across modes. So I want to suggest what kind of collaboration across sectors: public, private, industry, labor, education. How can you partner with each other in an affirmative and productive way going forward? What will they look like? Greg, why don't you kick that one around?
Yeah, I think we have a pretty clear model for how to do this. It's through the collective bargaining process. Again, you look at sort of what we're creating right now. The unions have been working with transit operators and the Transportation Learning Center to create the first worker training center for frontline transit workers. This is something where throughout for the last several decades, we've had a lot of training that go into transit, but mostly on the management side. We have not had federal support for training when it comes to the frontline worker side of all of this. So that's the type of partnership that it's being seeded by money from the federal government. It was conceived by both the unions and the operating side to create a really advanced skilled workforce that is being done to benefit everybody, both the management, unions, and the users of the system. So that is a model there that I think can be adapted moving forward, where you have the collaboration of all the different factors here to create an advanced skilled workforce that is able to meet the needs of the next generation here.
Pedro, what do you think these partnerships and collaborations are going to look like as they involve Thaddeus Stevens and the educational system more broadly?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think on the front end, industry and occupational advisory councils have to drive us real time and inform us around, what the workforce needs and what the workforce is going to need, and of the next generation learner. Then real time, we have students, and this also answers one of the questions in the chat. I mean, part of the robustness of programming is being able to internship, so that students, while they're learning the foundations of the skills needed to be successful in the workforce, are actually learning the practical application of that foundation in the workforce. So building a space where the learner of today can get into and practically apply what we're teaching them in our labs and what we're teaching them in our classrooms. And then long term, as I shared, there's an immediate need today, and there's a need 10 years out. I think what we're going to have to own in our space, in the space of education, is about how do we train the foundations of the workforce for today in all areas, but how do we continue to provide opportunities to re-engage them so that they can skill up and sharpen the tools that they need to be successful. Now, if I can just share one more thing, Roger, and it's also the bigger, broader community implications of it. So, for example, I was talking to a student a few months ago in a lab, and he had a great internship opportunity, but he didn't own a car. And so he took a lesser internship opportunity for a little less money, and somewhere that he was happy being at, but it wasn't kind of like the premier, because it was within public transportation from where he lived. And so I heard this story about this kid who kind of had to turn down his dream opportunity because he couldn't afford to get an apartment that was close to where this opportunity was, but he also didn't have any mode of transportation. So he took on another experience. And one of the areas that we talk to employers all the time, one, access to transportation, public transportation, some way to get there is important. Some form of flexible scheduling, especially if you're hiring someone who might already have a family. If you want to hire someone who's a mother, or a father, a primary caregiver at home, looking at the systems of support that now also are needed in our community to create, we're calling it soft skills for employers. We hear all the time that employees need to learn soft skills. We're actually telling employers, well, sometimes our employers need to learn soft skills, especially if you want to hire the best and brightest. 12 job offers per graduate. How are you standing out? But we also realize that there's infrastructure needed. Especially, as you know, you're from Lancaster, affordable housing, transportation, access to fresh foods and resources. That's the top of the list, needed to advance our local economy. And when you compare that to the Pennsylvania economy, to the national economy, every single center is saying the same thing. And that's where we have to work together to create a much more robust system of support for workers.
Super. Greg, chime in if you want.
I think Pedro, what you said about soft skills for employers, that's important. Like transit, we've made this argument that access to transit is one of the most important things towards addressing some of the equity problems in our country, because that provides access to jobs and job opportunities. The fact that you don't have, you look at Washington, I'm going to use DC as an example again, but when I lived in Northwest Washington, DC, one of the wealthier parts of the city, I could go out to the street corner and get a bus to any part of the city I wanted to, in addition to all of the subway lines that were available. When I moved to a different part of the city in Northeast DC, there's basically one bus line that gets you to one metro station. You go further out, it becomes even worse. So we need to build out transit and opportunity for people so they can get access to the training and to the jobs that can provide more economic security for them. So I think this is going to require overall a holistic approach towards investing in our infrastructure, in our schools, in our training programs, but making sure people have access to all that is an important part of it.
Terrific. So we're getting down toward the end, and before we close out and time runs away from us, I want to give each of you an opportunity to sum up. But in particular, there's a large number of attendees at our summit who are members of the industry, particularly the industry that's growing out in Pittsburgh, which is one of the global epicenters of development and testing of vehicle automation. From each of your perspectives, what do you expect and hope for in terms of your relationship with this new and emerging industry? What do you call on them to do with you to advance these goals? Greg, why don't you start, and then we'll go to Pedro.
One thing I meant to mention, didn't, is the goal of a manufacturer developer of this technology. I mean, and this is not a criticism of them, but their central mission is to develop the tech and deploy it. Their consumers, likewise, are going to be, their goals aren't thinking about these broader policy discussions. Their goal is to get a good product and one that will meet their needs as a consumer. And that whether that be personal vehicles or on the broader side, or the transit agency, for instance. But that's why the policy discussion is so important. And what I would ask for from the people who are doing the development, that are hopefully going to be doing the manufacturing, is that they're partners with us in the policy discussions, that they're not going to be to try to throw up roadblocks and discredit some of the arguments we're making. I think that this can be a community-based solution where we're finding these policies together, that we are thinking ahead about what the ramifications and benefits will be from the advancement of new tech, and that we can think about this as a community and make sure that we're advancing these things in a responsible and forward-thinking, and ultimately in a way that will benefit people up and down the economy.
Pedro?
Yeah, I think you great question, great point. That Greg that mentioned, and in the question, Roger, you mentioned Pittsburgh, and I think the Pittsburgh area is a great example, of a city and a collective of municipalities that embraced technology, and we see firsthand, some of the amazing opportunities that have come as a result of embracing that technology. Everything from higher ed opportunities, from workforce opportunities, from community development opportunities, from in building infrastructure, and even, the work that's been done there for years now, the autonomous, vehicles that are being used for ride sharing, and we've been using them as an example, as to how engaging and embracing technology can have a positive impact on the communities in general. I think what we also learned through that is the need to be thoughtful, right? To be really good, consumers of what technology brings, but also knowing that you have to build a whole system of support, behind it in order for it to be successful. Great innovations that happen in a vacuum, are novelties, right? But when we can invest in great innovation and build it as part of the fabric of our community and build around that infrastructure, that's societal changing. And I think, when we're looking at autonomous vehicles, when we're looking at the opportunities that it creates and the technologies that it brings to our communities, we can't become, we can't romanticize around the vehicles in itself. We have to realize that, there's a need around it, but also an investment that should be made towards it and taken from it. I'll share the one, perfect example. When we were at the state, one thing no one ever thought about was what type of highway paint do we use, because autonomous vehicles can't read every kind of paint. And so we had to coordinate all across the Commonwealth, multi-state efforts around, all right, what line paint are we going to use? If you didn't have the right minds at the table, we'd had all the, you'd have autonomous vehicles that could have never read, the paint on the highway, which would have made them obsolete. And this is why you have to think about the infrastructure. You have to build a community, around a community of practice around this innovation, out on such an amazing opportunity.
Well, that was a very fast hour. Greg, Pedro, thank you very much. Audience, if you agree with me that this was a fascinating and worthwhile discussion, you can so indicate by pushing the thumbs up function. If you disagree with me, you can also push thumbs up, and that will conclude our scientific research portion of the program. So thank you all for coming, and for those who asked questions. Particularly thank you, Greg Regan, Pedro Rivera. We're now going to exit presentation mode and go back into the conference room mode, where you will have 15 minutes to chat with one another. And when you're ready to move to the first breakout session, please go to the directory at the top left of your screen, open the drop-down menu, and select your next breakout session. The breakout sessions that are occurring next are the impact of CAVs in the public sector and the session on equity. Once you're ready to head to the breakout sessions, please open the directory, choose the session you would like to attend. Thank you, and see you all at the breakout sessions. Bye.